And for the final session of the day, we have a talk prepared earlier by MSC Cruises Head of Retail, Adrian Pittaway, who will discuss how the industry can adapt to the challenging course ahead by rethinking the cruise retail strategy to maximise sales. As this isn't live, Adrian won't be able to answer questions, but do stay tuned for an interview with myself and Adrian following the presentation. Enjoy.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Adrian Pittaway. I'm the head of retail at MSC Cruises. I'd like to thank DFNI for inviting me to come and talk to you this afternoon about a very pertinent topic, which is in cruise retail, how we're going to be able to navigate through the challenging waters that we have ahead of us. And what I want to try and do this afternoon is to talk to you a little bit about how cruise retail in total needs to adapt in a new environment. And hopefully, as one of the only in-house cruise operators operating currently, we're in a good place to be able to do that at MSC Cruises. What I want to try and do is really try and answer three questions for you today. The first one is, what do we see now? So what is happening on board ships that are operating? What do we think is going to happen next, potentially in the short to medium term? And then what is the longer term prospects for cruise retail, and what should we look forward to in the more distant future? So the context to start with is to say, what are we looking at now? What are we seeing now? And the key thing to understand is that out of over 300 plus cruise ships worldwide, today there are currently only 11 cruise ships in active service. It's a very small number of a global industry. And of those 11 cruise ships, we're obviously able to see a little bit of insight. At MSC Cruises, we were one of the first cruise lines in the world to restart. And since the 16th of August, our flagship MSC Grandiosa has sailed over 12 seven-day cruises in the Western Mediterranean, which has given us a great insight from the 30,000 plus guests that we've had on board so far. And since the 19th of October, our smaller ship, MSC Magnifica, has sailed 2 longer cruises to date over to Greece. And both of those ships have given us some combined information and given us some data which we're able to understand a little bit of. So the first thing to look at is, what do we see now? And the good news is that on the ships that are sailing, generally we're seeing that cruise spend has returned back into retail. The guests are coming back and they're spending. And they're doing that in 5 key ways. We're seeing that guests are really wanting to buy now, wear now, and feel good, and use retailing on board enabled to do that. The power of engagement has been very important, with our teams on board really able to sell actively to guests in a very strong way. In the shops, we've seen very much interested shoppers rather than window shoppers coming in. So those people coming into the shops have been much more likely to convert themselves into actual transactions. And the real KPI that's been the absolute cornerstone of the restart has been average transaction value. It's been incredibly important, and really one that's been driving much more than, say, penetration or other KPIs that we may have used. And finally, as the guest is trusting us, the cruise line, to offer them a safe holiday, that trust is really coming into the retail environment as well. And guests that are trusting us, MSC Retail, is absolutely an important indication of why guests are spending with us. And ultimately, as guests have returned shopping on board, we actually believe fundamentally that shopping is an essential part of the cruising return to service guest experience. It's been a really important part of what we think as the key facilities that we have on board. You know, you may think of restaurants, you may think of excursions, you may think of shows, you may think of relaxation. But actually, shopping has been an integral part of that guest experience. And really, it's been because we've been able to offer really personal service to our guests and really giving them excellent engagement and an enjoyable experience for them. Actually, we've seen more time sailing at sea, and that extra time that we have sailing at sea has allowed us to give guests more time to be able to shop on board. They've been really encouraged by all of the protocols that we've created, that we've got a safe retail environment across all our different shops. You know, we've adapted each of the different categories. We've understood exactly what's been required in the different products. And therefore, we've been able to really have that consistent, safe retail environment. The shopping on board has been convenient, and it's been good value for guests to be able to buy from. And that's been absolutely an important element that we've been able to advertise with. And lastly, and probably most importantly, you know, it's an enjoyable and a personal experience for guests. It's something that they really like to do. And we've seen some really high guest scores and actually very positive feedbacks from those guests that have been traveling with us. They've really enjoyed and taken a good time to enjoy the retailing that we have on board our ships. There are some things that are the same as before, and before COVID, these key things are still absolutely relevant. You know, people by people. You know, we are absolutely an engagement-based retail operation, and that has been absolutely the cornerstone of the restart. Our teams on board, the service, the knowledge, the trust, the honesty, the passion that they've been able to display products with have been very important. Secondly, guests are generally buying at the same points in the cruise that they were before. So as the cruise goes on, the sales get more important, and we see very much the rough percentages of sales per day pretty much as it was before. And lastly, you know, we're still not a gifting business. We're still absolutely a personal consumption business. You know, buy now, wear now is absolutely the mantra of the business model for cruising on board, and it remains unchanged. It's absolutely the same as it was before. People are wanting to indulge in themselves, and they're wanting to buy products that they can wear, they can enjoy straight away, and that's absolutely still the cornerstone of cruise retail. But there have been things that have changed. The main one, obviously, has been the impact of social distancing. You know, in shops now, the sort of the events that we had before, the way we'd really bring guests together to sort of enjoy various different activities and activations, that's had to change. You know, we were not able to do that as we were before. So all of the experience that we have on board is absolutely with the sort of the umbrella of a good level of social distancing and safety on board. Crew spending has been very important. You know, this is an area that obviously with most crews on board, most cruise ships unable to disembark, actually this has become an important part of the business model and the catering needs that we have to do, particularly in adapted products. And lastly is narrowcasting. You know, if we're not able to really broadcast our retail, the ability to narrowcast effectively to those interested guests on board has been really important for us to do. And that's absolutely been paramount to the way that we've been able to focus on the adaptation on board. So looking forward, you know, what's going to happen next? What are we expecting to see in the next period of time? I think I would start by really just talking about something very key, and that is that the recovery in cruise is going to take time. There are currently over 300 cruise ships around the world that have over 6 months of unsold inventory on board. You know, this is a key statistic that's going to sit where we are at the moment. And therefore, you know, I'd say to everyone, before we run, we must walk. You know, we must learn to really build ourselves back up again. You know, we've got to rebuild cash flow. We've got to look at markdown on the products that are on board and that we want to clear through as quickly as possible. We have to understand that there are going to be changed guest needs that we need to adapt to. And we have to think that our seasonality model is pretty much in reverse, with ships in the wrong place going to be restarting at very different times. And therefore, what product goes where is going to be difficult to do. And across cruise retailing, that's going to mean a lot of expert inventory planning that's really going to have to put in a precision in order to get back to where we were before. And this means that, you know, a recovery will happen for us, but it's going to be complicated and it is going to be volatile. It's going to be one that over the next period of time is going to be quite difficult to predict. Now, we're probably going to see 3 phases of recovery. In phase A, which I'm going to be looking at really from early next year onwards, we can look at a phase which we can call the initial recovery phase. Then pretty much from the middle part of next year, we should start to see a return to normality. And then really from 2022 onwards, we should see that return to the growth and a return to the sort of patterns of trade that we saw pre-COVID and things that we've talked about in previous DFNI seminars. So what are each of those areas going to take part in? Well, let's look at phase A first, this initial recovery. This should last us from the start of next year to the middle of 2021. And this will mean that we will have, in the industry overall, regional restarts with local passengers. It's very unlikely that you're going to see passengers flying very far to go to cruises, if at all. You know, you're not going to see Europeans going to America. You're not going to see Americans going to Australia. You're really going to see regional restarts with local passengers. All of the ships that will be operating will be at limited capacity. So therefore, a ship will be pretty much at around 50 to 70% of what you usually would have seen before. And in each of the fleets worldwide, you're going to see a few ships restarting. So if you have a fleet of 20 ships, pretty much in the start of next year, probably 3 or 4 ships are going to restart the fleets for most cruise lines. In retail, across cruise, the first and most important thing for us to deliver are the safety protocols. You know, we need to create and deliver the safe retail environment as cruising is relaunched in various different markets. That's absolutely our core priority more than anything else. one-to-one engagement, those interested shoppers, less foot flow coming into shops is going to be absolutely key to the service model. And we're going to have to be reactive. In different markets, there are going to be different needs, there are going to be different requirements. And therefore, the core word for us in generally in cruise retail is going to be reactivity. We're going to be unable to plan so far and ahead. We're going to be reacting to the sort of the way that the markets will restart again. Then looking forward into the middle of 2021, we should start to see a return to normality. And this will probably last us up until probably early 2022. By this time, we should see most areas in operation again. We should see the majority of fleets in service with pretty much increased capacity, not probably at optimum levels, but an increased capacity. And the main people cruising are going to be those people who have deferred their holiday from 2020. There's a lot of cruisers that haven't been able to take the holidays they wanted this year, and a lot of that has deferred into next year. So we're going to see a lot of loyal cruisers. We're not going to see so many new cruisers. Those returning guests are very much coming back because they still want to go on the holiday that they wanted before. In this time in retail, we're probably going to start reviewing the safety protocols. We're going to start thinking about changing a little bit of the dynamics in the shops to change to that return to normality. We're going to be able to start thinking about new messages and new promotions. And actually, we're going to start to be able to become proactive again. It's a time where we're going to be able to start planning in the longer term, and actually across the industry, we can restart that proactiveness across the different cruise ships. And then into phase C, this is the area where growth should return again. And we're looking here at really 2022 onwards. By this time, you should see full fleet operations across all cruise lines around the world. We will start to see those new market opportunities come back again, those markets that people were looking at potentially in 2019 and were looking forward to 2020. They can go back and look at those again in 2022. And we should start to see that return to the pre-COVID growth plans that was absolutely the core plank of what was going on in cruise retail. We've seen a lot of growth in the last few years. We should start to see that come back quite quickly in 2022. At that time in retail, we should start to look at new products and categories. We should start to be able to think about experimenting with new ideas. And we should start to think about that longer term growth model that we've been talking about a lot previously, and really be able to restore it and bring it back to as it was again. So what does that mean? What is the longer term prospects, and what should we be able to do? Well, I would really recommend to people interested in cruise retail, this is a good time to not just necessarily think about the short term challenges that we have, but actually start to think about the longer term prospects that we're able to take part in. And I would look at that in 6 key ways. Cruise retail will deliver strong growth again. That's absolutely for certain. But absolutely, how do you prepare for that recovery? What should you think about, and what would you be looking at now as being important? The first one, and probably the most important one for me, is that investment to continue training on board. Whether it be through virtual or in-person support, this is absolutely the simplest and most effective return on investment inside cruise. We will be a people-based selling business. We will continue to be that. And therefore, that training of sales staff on board is absolutely paramount. The second point is to prioritize investment in new builds and flagships. As we restart again, these ships will deliver the highest potential. We expect to show the highest potential, both in terms of the way that guests will rebook again, but in terms of the way that those flagships will be implemented on board. The third thing is to think globally. And I'd really say to most cruise retail teams, don't going back into areas again. You have to think about this channel globally, not regionally. We don't want to see silos again. And the best way that cruise retail will recover is actually for teams to look at it really in as global a sense as possible. The traditional cruise markets are going to be the areas where recovery will start. So really focus areas in Caribbean, in the Mediterranean, and Baltic. This is the area that will really be the easiest place to start. And the emerging markets, they will come after that, and they will come in a period of time. We need people to understand the complexities that the channel will face. There's going to be a lot of issues and overall problems for us to face, whether it be in logistics, whether it be in safety, whether it be in new regulations, whether it be in new bureaucracy. That complexity that comes into cruise retail is really important to understand as much as possible. And then lastly, but obviously most importantly, is also to look towards the next cruise generation. It's a great time for us to really think about those guests that are going to come in and what they're going to be looking at, whether it be in sustainability, in uniqueness of product, in the connection with the cruise that they're having or the memory that they're having. That next cruise generation are really going to be coming back, we think, in a quite short period of time. So really, it's a good time to think about that in terms of the way that assortments, categories, products are set up. At the core of this principle is going to be the idea of guest engagement, and that growth that will come back into cruise again is going to come through guest engagement, and it will change slightly. And we can think about the ways that we can do that. I would say the first thing is to use this opportunity we've had of being in a lockdown for such a long time to innovate in our team engagement on board cruise ships, whether it be through remote learning, whether it be through creating new brand ambassadorships. The ways that we can train, the way that we can develop, the way that we can connect to teams on board is really something that we can evolve with and something that can be really done in a dynamic sense. The second thing is that whilst we remain a physical retail environment selling model, this idea of phygital guest engagement is something that's important. The digital way that we communicate to guests through the protocols that we have on board, through the way that we're having to market is becoming increasingly important. And the way that we set up the experiences, the value, the exclusivity that comes within cruise retail must be thought of not only in the physical way that we present it, but also in the digital way that we market it as well. We see that selling with trust and integrity is very important, and whether it be through sustainability, sourcing, localization, or provenance of products that we sell, we think that this is going to be a really important part of cruising going forward, and it's something that's very important to cruise lines and something that we're really going to have to look at as a key marketing point of the industry over the next period of time. We're going to see that potential category investment can be targeted on the areas of need and desire. We think the most exciting growth prospects in the cruise channel in the relaunch are in areas where people really want to feel good, want to look good. So areas like fashion, jewelry, cosmetics are going to be really, really important. And I would really say that these are areas, if you're not looking at, it's an area to really look at cruise, because it's a great potential investment and it's a great potential area of recovery. We're going to have to innovate the way that we sell categories, and I would say to a lot of brands, to develop new global cruise specific events, experiences, and selling models is going to be important, because that ultimately way of working is something that is not gone away. It's something that we've talked about before in previous seminars, and we think it will really come back again very quickly. And finally, as I talked about earlier in the presentation, narrowcasting is the new broadcasting. We think that the ability to find those interested shoppers on board, optimize that through various events, is something that we've really learned out of the restart, whether it be through private events, having limited availability, having better profile marketing, really capturing as best as we can. The ability to communicate to guests in a much more specific way is something that really can give us a good benefit going forward as we try to sort of move away from the sort of traditional broadcasting model that we've done. So all of that together hopes you a good insight in terms of what's going to happen. Across this industry, the ships are going to continue to innovate. They're going to continue to be built. No cruise line is cancelling orders. We really continue to develop the channel with the growth that we had before. And these new ships, this next generation of ships, are absolutely going to be at the core of the recovery in the cruise industry. So therefore, that innovation that's going to come in the hardware of cruising needs to be delivered into the retailing as well. So the most important thing for everybody to think about is actually this is not simply a case of the cruise industry stopping. This is a case of starting again, walking first, and then being able to really look forward to what is going to be a very exciting and dynamic set of growth over the next few years. So thank you very much for your time. I hope the presentation has been useful to you and you got a little bit of insight out of it.
Well, thank you very much, Adrian. Some great insights there into the current situation and how the industry will evolve. I think we have time for a few quick questions with you. You've mentioned recently that the industry really needs to go back to basics in the immediate future. Can you elaborate on that? What that means for the cruise retail channel?
Well, I think in cruise retailing, the first thing that we need to go back to is to go with what we know works well. And that would be for the time being that we're just going back into the best sellers, into products we know sell, into brands that we know are very popular with guests, and focusing on areas that we know are going to sell quickly and be able to be developed quickly. I don't think it's a time for us to bring a lot of new products into the channel. I don't think it's a time at the moment for us to bring a lot of new categories on board that we haven't thought about before, because that is going to have to come later. The back to basics for us at the moment is, going back to what sells, understand how it sells, and really build on that as the first point. Back in the presentation, we talked about cash flow, and the most important thing that cruise retailers have got to start with to support the industry in total is to get back on the right point and build across the ships a sustainable business.
Okay. Obviously, MSC, one of the first few cruise lines to restart, and you've already had 30,000 guests, you mentioned. MSC Grandiosa, can you tell us a little bit more about how the retail environment worked there? What was the footfall like? What was the engagement with guests and so on?
Yeah, so obviously we restarted again in August. We created all the protocols, we created all the new infrastructure. We did a lot of changes in signage, in guest flow, in access, in rules, and all the things that were required of us to really operate within the sort of the MSC new protocols. So we were a little bit uncertain as to what was going to happen, but actually what we saw quite quickly was actually that the guests wanted to shop again. As I said in the presentation, that they wanted to come back, they wanted to feel good because they felt safe. And I think by feeling safe on a cruise ship and by feeling sort of, in an enjoyable environment, every guest on MSC before they come on board has been tested, they've been checked, they've been screened, we've gone through as much as we can do. And then on board, we have that sort of second level of precaution, whether it be in, social distancing or the various expectations that we have with them. So when they came into the shops, the first thing that we saw quite quickly was that they were engaging with our team. Our team were able to talk to them about products. We were really able to bring them back into enjoying retail again. And actually, the average transaction values, the amounts that those guests were spending with us, actually improved significantly to what we were expecting them to be. And that was really, it was surprising. It was really good to see. And it's consistently remained like that. In the 12 cruises that we've restarted in Grandiosa, the one thing that we've seen actually is a very consistent guest spending pattern. And that's allowed us to sort of understand this new way of operating, a slightly different way of selling. And we've evolved a little bit on the promotions. We've evolved a little bit on what we're ordering in. And we've tried to really harness that to actually say, well, that's worked brilliantly. Can we replicate it elsewhere? And, onto the second ship, Magnifica, we then did the same ideas, and we saw a similar set of guest patterns. So now as we look to evolve it into other markets of the world, we're hoping in the next period of time to start in a number of different regional markets. We're really interested to see with what we've seen on Grandiosa, is that going to replicate itself again elsewhere? And are we seeing that sort of new guest spend as a global pattern rather than as a regional pattern? Because at the moment, we only see it here in Europe, so with European guests. So once we try it on other nationalities like Americans, Brazilians, South Africans, Chinese, et cetera, is that going to continue on? And are we going to see it? And for us, that's the sort of, the next question to be answered.
Okay, that's really interesting. So in terms of the retail spend and the changes that you've seen there, did you see evidence of that sort of back to basics appetite in terms of the product offer?
Yeah, we see, as I was saying in there, we've seen categories like jewelry, fashion, cosmetics have really been at the forefront. And guests have gone back to their favorite brands. They've gone back to the products that they know and love. They want to replace the perfume that they haven't been able to buy for a long period of time. They want to go and get some nice makeup. They want to sort of look good. They want to go and get a nice outfit for an evening that they haven't probably had an opportunity to buy for a number of months. So we think that the reason why the bestsellers or the back to basics is working is that a lot of guests, it's their sort of their first repurchase of product that they probably haven't bought for a period of time. So because of the convenience and the value that we can offer on board, that's obviously been a really important reason as to why they've gone back into those, their favorites, as it were, rather than necessarily going into sort of more newer or different products.
Okay. Some conversations I've had with cruise retailers recently suggest that there may be an appetite or a focus over the next coming months to focus on kind of the relationship that you have between the sales staff and the customer, and to maybe focus more on the old style of selling on cruise, the high ticket items, the jewelry, watches, and the kind of memorable products that you buy from your vacation. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that we see very much the beauty of cruise retailing always is time, and that's why categories like watches and jewelry have traditionally done so well, because you can take 7 days to get an emotional connection with a luxury jewelry or a Swiss watch, and those high ticket items are traditionally always good for us. So in this new environment, that product is absolutely essential. And generally, the luxury products, we don't really see too deferred in these periods. Like, people like to invest, they still like to, because they feel safe and secure by investing into luxury items. So actually that traditional product category and that traditional way of selling products on a one-to-one basis, based on engagement, trust, and the connection with the staff, I go back to my people by people, is absolutely key in going back to what we know and being able to do it in a good way. And the pattern of trade we've seen so far has absolutely sort of replicated that, is that people are they're buying from people, they're buying with trust, and they're buying because they've got this really nice connection to a product that they've maybe wanted to buy for a long period of time.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you've mentioned that the shoppers that you are seeing are interested shoppers, so they're going into the stores with an intention. Have these, I guess, social distancing, wearing protective gear, etc., has that had an effect on the relationship between sales staff and customers that you've seen? You've obviously had some really positive results. So, what's the story from MSC, Grandiosa, Magnifica?
I think actually, to be honest, it's the opposite, because the number of people going into stores has gone down. I will say that, we're not seeing these window shoppers. Traditionally on a cruise ship previously, you may have been waiting for dinner or waiting to go to a show, and you think, well, let's go and browse around the shops to kill some time. That's not happening now. What we're seeing is in this sort of environment of social distancing, people are coming into the shops if they're interested to buy. That's what we define by interested shoppers. And therefore, because there's less sort of going round people, the people that are coming in, we can connect much easier with them, and we can understand their needs much better. So we haven't seen any real challenges in social, because everybody's wearing a mask, everybody's still able to communicate. We really sort of trained our team on more focusing on good body language. So if you're wearing a mask and you can only see eye contact, you can't see smiles, you can't see other indicating signs, how do you communicate differently? How do you communicate in a better way in order to make sure that the experience is absolutely as it was before? So we, in any way, we didn't want social distancing ever to be a reason not to give us good service. We wanted it actually to be the reason why we'd give better service, to actually focus even more than ever before on making sure that the guest journey inside the store was absolutely as it should be. And we really updated our service expectations and the training that we did with our team to really make sure that that was enhanced, so that the guests felt safe, they felt enjoyable, they felt that they were having a good one-to-one relationship with the member of our team, and that absolutely reflected itself in the results that we saw.
Brilliant. Okay. And I guess I think I'm going to have to roll up my last few questions into one. First of all, do you feel that there is still the capability, appetite, and room for retail activations and experiences over the next couple of months? And then finally, what is your message to the industry, and particularly the brands you're working with, and those looking to get into cruise and those you're already working with?
Okay, good questions. On activations, I think at the moment activations are limited. The traditional activations that we've done on cruise ships that have been really fun and really engaging, they're a little bit stilted at the moment. And as I say, we're doing more on things like private showings or one-to-one selling. But actually, the traditional activations that brands may have done, at the moment, we're saying just wait a little bit, because actually it's probably not the right time to do that. But I still want to go back to those. I don't think those activations should go away. If you're creating a marketing calendar for 2021 for cruise, you plot them into the second half. You put them into Q3, Q4, and you say, right, okay, at that point, hopefully all being good, we should be able to go back into what we were doing before. On to the second point, absolutely. One of the most important things at the moment for us is to say to all brands who are a little bit worried, a little bit uncertain about the cruise channel, be patient. It's gonna come back, and it's gonna come back in a very strong way. Maybe not in 2021. Maybe in 2021 it will be limited and it will be a little volatile in terms of where it is. but we certainly perceive from 2022 that this demand that people have for going on holiday, and actually what the cruise industry has been able to do in terms of that safe environment, will absolutely be key to bringing guests back on board. And we will see, you know, all those guests that wanted to come cruising with us that haven't been able to, you know, that's a year's worth of guests to be put back into 21 and 22. And then all that next cruise generation, those new cruise guests are going to come in as well. You know, there's a lot of new exciting ships coming into market. You know, in 2022, we've got the World Class, which is going to be the most innovative cruise ship ever designed. And then in 2023, we've got a luxury new cruise line actually going to be launching with a whole new different retail model and a whole exciting set of opportunities and completely different experiences. So, you know, if you're patient and if you sort of, you know, just bear with us while we sort of get the industry back on its feet again, cruise retail is going to be absolutely where it was before. And I think to all brands who sort of listen to us and they've come into the channel in the last few years, they've got excited by it. You know, if you can be patient with this channel, it's going to come back and it's going to give you very strong growth again. And it's probably going to lead a recovery, I would say, in one sense, maybe faster than some air travel, because ultimately that market in cruise is a very flexible and adaptable one. And we will very quickly understand exactly what's required in order to get guests back into ships and really bring the numbers back into the whole industry again.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Adrian. Some really great insights, some great advice, and we look forward to writing about MSC's developments over the next coming months. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Kapila.